evening to everyone joining us from India, and good afternoon to everyone joining us from the UK. I'm Professor Jane Falkingham, and as Vice President International and Executive Director of the India Centre at the University of Southampton, I'm delighted to welcome you to the first of a series of fireside chats with inspirational members of the South Asian diaspora. Today marks the launch of the Pioneers Project, an exciting programme of research supported by UKRI India, the Asia Media Group, the India Business Group and the India Centre here at the University of Southampton. The Pioneers Project aims to document the unique contributions and multifaceted experiences of the South Asian diaspora across generations, allowing us to better understand the associated wider social, cultural, intellectual and economic impact that South Asians have had on British society over the last 100 years. A key output from the project will be the creation of a new digital platform where the contents can be stored, curated and shared, so that this platform can be augmented and become a living legacy which truly captures the spirit of the United Kingdom. This research is part of a wider University of Southampton research strategy of carrying out world-class research that is changing the world for the better. I can think of no one better to kick off our project than Meera Syal, an actor par excellence who's excelled in literature, arts, theatre and film, and as we saw in the short clip, has made everlasting memories of her own in virtually every British household, with series such as Goodness Gracious Me and The Kumars at number 42 and many other works. I'd like to thank her on behalf of the University of Southampton for finding the time to join us. However, before I hear from her, I'd like to hand over to our partners who've been the inspiration and vision behind the project to say a few words. So Lord Patel of Bradford is here. I'm
just arrived.
Fantastic to see you. It was Lord Patel's idea first. I think we shared about 3 years ago at a dinner at the House of Lords. So delighted to have you here. Over to you.
So firstly, look, huge honour and so many apologies. I was on an interview panel, so there was no way I could sort of just say, you know, you've got the job or you haven't. I'm going. many apologies. And what can I say? Meera Syal, I'm sure everybody said everything that needs to be said. My middle name's Kumar, if that's any future, legacy. Actually, so it's an absolute privilege to be here. This whole journey began after a very dear friend of mine passed away unexpectedly. Somebody you probably all know, Lord Noon. He was the Curry King of the United Kingdom. Now, Ghulam was a really dear friend, and it was almost like a father, an older brother, and he passed away very unexpectedly. Fortunately, he'd captured his story from humble beginnings to being the Curry King of the United Kingdom. But so in his memorial, I made a video, and it was something that just sort of resonated in the head to say, he captured his story, and we have some footage, but so many of our wonderful diaspora who've been so successful in building the foundations of this country, the United Kingdom, we've never captured it, and people have gone, and we'll never know the stories, we'll never know it. And for me, it was trying to capture this, and I thought, I can't do this myself, but I know a lot of people. So I racked my brains, and of course, the obvious sign was, two wonderful brothers, Kalpesh and Shailesh Solanki, who do this day in, day out, who have access to wonderful people, not just, this presentation of an economic contribution, but arts, sports, healthcare, which is actually, when you think about what the last year has done, our contribution to healthcare, and some of us have paid the highest price, in terms of looking after people in this country. Politics goes without saying, academia, human rights activists, so not people who've just excelled in business, but all those other areas. And I knew these two brothers, had an archive of wonderful people to draw upon. And so I met them, and obviously it's become all the more poignant because, you know, one of the pioneers was their father, who sadly passed away. So, you know, it's actually, you know, become more urgent to capture these stories. And then, of course, you think, you know, we want some academic rigor to this. We want some research. We want to know who we have. And then we need somebody who can tell a story, to people on the streets, and it'll resonate with them. So you need some journalistic instincts. For me, that was a bit tough, thinking about journalists. But there was one person I met so many years ago who I know tells the most wonderful stories that people listen to, who's honest, who's integrity. And there was no question, you know, we went to Barnie Choudhury, who has all the ingredients that I would want for somebody to capture stories for us. And then, so how do we come to Southampton from a meeting talking about creating this historic archive that will last forever? I have the honour of chairing something called the India Business Group that Amarjit Singh is a chief exec of. He's based in Southampton. He brought me to Southampton on lots of issues, and I came across the university, and you know, I'm connected to loads of universities across the country. But what a gem in the academic world, and a gem not only in the academic world, but a gem in terms of turning academic excellence into deliverable projects that impact on people in the world. And that's what we wanted. And to put the cream on the cake, they had a phenomenal arts and culture department. So it became a no-brainer for me. It was quite easy to put these jigsaw pieces together. That's all I do, is put bits together, and then everybody else does the work, and occasionally I come and take some credit for it. But that's, you know, that's how all this began. So, you know, Jane, Sabu, all the, you know, Bindi put effort into making this happen. This is going to be a piece of work that's going to last a lifetime, and it will capture something that we need to do. I'll just end, but because Barney asked me a question and said, what would you like to ask Meera? You know, what would you like me to ask her? And I said, well, if she wants to make another movie about a corrupt Indian Yorkshireman who runs a massive drug cartel, who's vicious and violent, please can you consider me for it?
Okay, I've got your number.
Bless you. Thank you very much. And apologies for being here late again.
Kalpesh Solanki, please. Would you like to say a few words as well? Thank you, my lord.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Kamlesh Bhai and Jane. We would like to welcome you to this first of many Fireside Conversations. This event is a part of the work we are undertaking with the University of Southampton to build bridges and record the history of our community. Salish and I are delighted to be involved with this unique project. Our father, Ramniklal Solanki, started our first publication, Garvi Gujarat, on April Fool's Day in 1968. He led the way in providing quality news and features to the increasing number of Asians coming to the UK from India and East Africa. He was considered one of the greatest journalists in the Gujarati language and was highly respected. We have many engaging stories of what our parents achieved and how they helped our community. This is why we embarked on the idea to know the history of our community through the pioneers of our community. Asians excel in many areas of UK life. We cannot imagine the NHS functioning without ethnic doctors and nurses. As the nation awakes, Asian retailers are stocking their shop with fresh milk, bread, and the day's newspapers. And it's the local community pharmacist, most likely an Asian, who ensures the critical supply of our medicines. The Asian community makes an immense contribution to Britain and the British way of life. From eminent doctors advising on the pandemic, to the head of counter-terrorism keeping us safe, to the Home Secretary and Chancellor, the Asian community has left an indelible mark on Britain. These great stories of achievement have their roots in the pioneering generation who came before and laid the foundation for the success we enjoy today. And our guest today, Meera Syal, is not just a pioneer, but a national treasure, a multi-talented actress, author, and comedian. She has been making the nation laugh for nearly 3 decades since the launch of the groundbreaking series, Goodness Gracious Me. On behalf of Asian Media Group, thank you for joining us today and being part of our project.
Barney, it's over to you, I think.
Great, thank you very much indeed. My lords, ladies, fellow guests, welcome. Now, at this time, it's usual to go into all the stuff that Meera's done over the past 3 decades or so. And I thought long and hard about what I was going to say. And I came up with one sentence, which is, Meera is a national treasure and she deserves a peerage. So, in the words of a special guest on the Kumars of 42, this is my message to Lord Patel of Bradford. Please make it so. And you'll understand the reference to that in a few moments from now. Now, I could say more, but I think it's better we hear everything from Meera. So Meera, welcome.
Thank you, Barney.
When we first approached you, you were so enthusiastic about this. It was just a delight to have you here. But we were hoping to get you earlier, but you were abroad filming. Are you allowed to tell us what you were doing and where?
Oh yes, I am. I was doing a Disney film called Spin, and we were shooting in Canada. And the lovely thing about this film is it's Disney's first film that features a South Asian family. So that's quite exciting. It's called Spin, and it's going to be out on the Disney Channel, I think, in the summer.
Who were you playing? What is your character?
I'm obviously playing the grandma because that's the age I am now. So insulted. But the grandma, it's a great character actually. She was described in the script as think Barbara Streisand meets Bollywood, and I was like, I'm there. But it's a very classic Disney tale, one of those heartwarming. It's a family. They run a restaurant. The young girl is very talented musically. She wants to be a DJ. Her father isn't happy with the idea, mainly because his wife, who has died sadly, was a wonderful musician. So the idea of music being back in the family, which is quite interesting. It's not that he's a strict papa. He said it's too painful for him to see his daughter follow the same path as the wife he misses so much. So I've literally brought this little girl up and I'm her biggest fan. So it's very warm, very family friendly. And it's fantastic to see a South Asian family just portrayed as a family, with all of their complexities and needs and desires. And the whole crew was very diverse, and it was a very life-affirming experience, actually.
What does that tell us about your industry at this moment, that Walt Disney, the one that started off with Snow White, is now moving towards our communities?
Yes. Well, I think there is a sea change going on. I mean, you always feel when you've been in the business 30 odd years, it's like finally, we've been waiting for this for a long time. But it seems to me that there is genuine need and desire to do diverse stories that are not just the obvious ones. In the 70s, 80s, they were the more obvious ones. I think that was the first stage of our representation. I think now it's much more about what are the universal stories that we all share that are filtered through a specific cultural lens. And interestingly, the more specific and accurate you get culturally, the more universal the story becomes. I think Coco is a very good example. Pixar's fantastic film about a Mexican family, very authentically Mexican, very, you look at the crew and they're all Mexican, the writers, but actually when you actually do your research properly and when you involve people and ask them to tell their own stories, you get a very genuine and universal product. And I think that's what they were doing with this. Our director was an Indian woman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who is that? Who was it?
Manjari Mukherjee.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic director.
Wow.
She's from Bombay and based in LA now. And
Yeah.
she did an amazing job. And it was just so great to be on a set where you weren't going, do you know what? We are actually a Hindu family and that's a Muslim icon there on the wall. That's a bit of the Quran. That might not work. A number of sets I've been on where that's happened. No, actually they're Sikh, so he wouldn't be called Iqbal Khan. Sorry. Didn't have to do that because, here was an Indian woman directing the film. So, it's not just about diversity in front of the camera. It's so important that we are represented behind the camera, in the crew, in the writing, in the production, in the direction. That's what makes the difference to authenticity.
Yeah. I want to come on to that later if I can, because I want to take you through. We're already getting messages through from all our guests who are watching this event. And I just want to read one out. Black lives and brown lives also matter. Disney and South Asian family. Wow. Sri Kandiya. So thank you very much for that. I want to take you back to when you were young. Your parents came over from India. What did they do? Why did they come over?
Oh, well, my parents were a terrible combination of not well off and ambitious and talented. And that was quite a bad combination in India in the late 50s. Because though they were very bright, because my father had been a refugee after partition, his family had to start again and they really weren't well off. My mother's family had also moved to Delhi because my grandfather had been ill. So they both had a real fall of fortunes, although they were both quite educated people. So they were very much economic refugees, I think, as many people were in that generation. They wanted somewhere to put their talent and their ambition, hard as it was for them to leave. So really that was their main reason. And I think, like a lot of their generation, they didn't know if it would be forever. But as my mother put it, well, we weren't going to stay long, but then you arrived and we thought we might as well stay. So it's my fault. Thank you. But I think it always is. But I used to ask them when I was little, do you ever regret coming? Because of course it was so hard. And, there are a lot of stories that your parents don't tell you, especially when you're little, because they don't want to upset you. But the racism, the no Irish blacks and dogs notices, the going for a job interview and suddenly finding it's mysteriously filled. I mean, they went through all of that. And I did used to ask them, do you regret coming? And they've always said, no, absolutely not, because you kids would never have had the opportunities in India that you got here.
You actually lived in a mining town, Essington.
I did.
I presume you must have been the only Asians in the village.
Yes, we were pretty much, yeah.
So did your family come across direct racism? Were you called the P word? Were you ever abused like that? Were things shoved through your letterbox?
Interestingly enough, never from the villagers. It was a fantastic upbringing in a sense, because I found myself in the middle of a sort of white working class community that doesn't really exist anymore in Britain. Certainly the mining communities don't. They were sort of ripped apart by the end of the industries. But here we all were at the bottom of the heap together. And the only thing that people cared about is, are you a good villager or a bad villager? And because my mum and dad were very friendly and they spoke English and they joined in with all the village fetes and this and that, actually we had a great community, and it was proper working class solidarity. I mean, the dream that it is class that unites us, and there we all are together. That's actually, I did have one of those idyllic childhoods where everyone would watch each other's kids and we'd all tumble around in a big group and run in the fields, and I had a lot of freedom growing up, which I think formed probably part of my rebellious spirit. Whereas my other friends who were living in more urban areas were policed by the aunties. They couldn't get away with anything. I, on the other hand, was on my bike, scabby knees. I was a real tomboy. And I'm sure that gave me a real sense of adventure. It's not to say there wasn't racism. Of course there was, but it didn't come from the people we lived with. It would come from outsiders coming into the park, or when I was travelling to school. Because I grew up in the West Midlands, and the West Midlands in the 70s was a pretty heavy place to grow up in. So
you had this wonderful guy called Enoch Powell who loved immigrants. Absolutely. Said that the whole country should be full of immigrants. That's the 1970s. I don't remember.
I don't remember that. I do remember my parents. I mean, the Rivers of Blood speech in '68 was a very seminal moment for many, many immigrants. And I don't remember the speech itself, but the aftermath of my parents discussing it, I remembered very well. And for years, I thought that's the reason that all Asians have suitcases on top of their wardrobe, because Enoch's going to throw us out with a minute's notice. I honestly thought that.
It's true, though, isn't it? I mean, what people don't realise is that every single Asian household, on top of the Almirah, would have the suitcases.
Of course, always. Yeah, the suitcases. the Tupperware drawer, the Tupperware cupboard, and the cling film on the remote control. I mean, it's a rite of passage, right?
And the plastic over the sofas, right?
The plastic for best, yes. Which would be whipped off when guests came and then put back on.
Absolutely. And also on the floor, the plastic on the carpets as well. No. You're taking me back to my childhood. So, when did you first come across racism? You said that you went to school in the urban area. When did you first come across racism?
Oh, it was as a kid growing up in the village. And when I got to senior school, it was a long, long way, and I had to take 2 buses, one from the village to the nearest bus stop to town, and then another one to town. It was a long commute, about an hour and a half actually. And if I missed that bus, I had to walk through quite a big council estate, and I did miss the bus quite often. And honestly, that was daily dread, really, because that's where I stuck out a mile. Not only was I the only brown face, I was also in the grammar school's school uniform. We had to wear tam o' shanters. I mean, how cruel was that? I had a woolly hat on with a pom-pom on it. I mean, it's just saying kick me, isn't it, really? But you know what? I learnt really early on, horrible as that was, that if I looked like a victim and I behaved like a victim, it got worse. And if I walked with confidence and if I said stuff back, and occasionally had to use my fists, sadly, it got less. And that was quite a good lesson. I thought, you know what, if I'm going to survive here, I have really got to stand firm and stand tall. I've just got to front it out, no matter how scared I am, because this isn't going to go away. And I can't apologise for the space I occupy. So I have to love that space I occupy.
And I've got this image now of a pugilistic Meera Syal. So take boxing lessons or martial arts, or because presumably you were walking home alone.
I was walking home alone. No, I did get into a couple of scraps, but I don't know. I think I was so furious at the ignorance that was being directed my way.
What were they doing? What was it?
Just the name calling, the usual P word, unimaginative stuff. But actually, from kids that just had miserable lives themselves, and wanted to take it out on somebody else. I sort of got that even at a young age. But I did know that I had to sort of nip it in the bud. And what they didn't expect, and this is what stopped it, they didn't expect an Asian to fight back. They all thought we were passive. They all thought we were victims. They all thought we'd just, scurry along with our eyes down and say sorry. Our parents' generation sometimes had to do that. Our generation were very different. We were born here, and we knew in order to survive here, we couldn't do that anymore.
And I think that's what I've been finding out. And when I reported from Oldham, Bradford and Burnley, that was the dying thing, which is that our parents' generation were grateful to be here.
Right.
We, on the other hand, belonged here. And I think that's what you're trying to say, isn't it?
Yeah, that is exactly right. Yeah.
And would you go home and would you say to your parents, this is what happened to me, or did you hide it from your parents?
I mainly hid it. I think we all did. I think we all knew that our parents were going through their own stuff, and we didn't want to worry them. I think if it got to the stage where I couldn't cope, I probably would have had to tell them. But I coped. I coped enough. I got tough.
Tell me about your parents' influence on you, because we all know that South Asian parents are special people. How much did they influence you?
Oh, hugely. Massive influence. I mean, I was very lucky. My parents were unusual in the fact that they had what's called a love marriage, as opposed to a marriage, I suppose. And they eloped way back in India in the late 50s. So my mother was Sikh and my father was Hindu, which wasn't such a big deal in itself, because there were quite a few mixed Hindu-Sikh marriages, but my mother's family were quite traditional Sikh. But they fell in love and they got married. And I think that really gave them such a sort of understanding of what it was to defy convention and be unusual, that I think they passed on to me, and I think made them a lot more compassionate and tolerant when it came to having this kid that actually wasn't going to be a doctor, was no good at science or maths, and it was very plain from an early age. And because they'd gone through what they went through, when it came to me choosing my subjects, and it was clear I was you know, good at English, good at languages, good at arts. I had their blessing. So that influence was huge, because a lot of my friends, in fact, all of my friends of my age, were forced into subjects they didn't want to do because their parents, you know, out of worry for their future, would say, no, you must do sciences, and arts are no good, you know, you won't get any work with that. We have to do something vocational because that's what immigrants do. So my parents were incredibly unusual by going, okay, if that's what you love, if you're passionate about something, we think you'll be better at it because you'll work harder at it because you love it. And they were absolutely right.
And you went to the University of Manchester. You came out with a double first.
Good Indian girls here.
No problems with your parents, but other people who don't see brown faces on arts and drama courses. What was that like?
Yeah, I was the only woman of colour in the whole arts faculty. That's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Well, it is now.
It's mind-blowing. In the whole arts faculty, not just the drama department. There was one black guy in drama department, but I don't ever remember seeing another brown face in the arts department at all. Plenty in the medical school, obviously. But no, it was unusual. But actually, you know, it sort of gave me a massive advantage, because I suddenly realised that a lot of the material I was creating, people had never heard before. In fact, they didn't know. It sounds so obvious to say. I mean, it was said to us when we started Goodness Gracious Me, are Asians funny? It's like,
not really.
Well, I don't know. Let me tell you a joke and you can tell me. But, you know, the stuff that at Manchester, I did start to write, and I did start to do skits and monologues, and I was cutting my baby teeth and suddenly realising that stuff that was so familiar to me that I could just, you know, write without thinking about it, people would go, oh my God, is that how you really think? Is that what happened? Is that what is happening out there? Is that how you feel? And I suddenly thought, okay, you know, on the one hand, it's going to be lonely and hard, but on the other hand, I hope that at least I'm expressing something of a brand new generation in this country that actually haven't been heard. And maybe there is some value to that.
How lonely was it?
All the time. I'm so used to being the only one in the room all the time. Yeah, it's in the early years. It was, and you feel a sort of madness. It's, you know, the loneliness leads to a kind of, am I mad trying to do this? I don't see anybody out there like me. How will I get a job? You know, who will hire me? Who will think whatever I write is relevant or interesting? Will they get it? I mean, all of these things. That whole thing, if you can see it, you can be it, is so important. And because, of course, all my, you know, the South Asian performers and creatives I did see were all in India. And wonderful as they were, that had absolutely no relevance to my existence here. So in a way, most of my inspiration came from black artists in America, because for me, they were the nearest equivalent that I could see of a minority community or a dispossessed community who were finding their space and their voice through the creative arts.
Yeah, I remember in the 60s a drama that America used to do called Julia, which was about a black woman making her way in the world.
Yes, it was Diane. Was it Diane Carroll? I think. Yes. Yeah.
That's the lasting impression. Of course, there were people like Trevor McDonald who came later, and then the wonderful Zindagi Jivan.
Oh well, we all watched that. Yeah.
So we of a certain generation know what it's like, but I cannot imagine how you coped. What were your coping mechanisms? Because here you were away from home, alone, in digs, and with no other brown faces in your faculty.
Mm. Well, the great thing about the creative arts is they are a democracy, and the arts are a place where, you know, the dispossessed and the marginalised quite naturally gather to have their voice, because the arts has always said, you know, the new voices are the things that keep all of us alive. So there was a great meritocracy in the department as far as me being able to be creative. I think that's why I've always loved theatre so much. Theatre for me feels like a family where we are all making the same thing together, and no one's more important than anybody else, or shouldn't be.
You wrote something semi-autobiographical, Anita and Me. It's now part of the GCSE syllabus.
Yeah.
That shows how far we've come. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, that you are now part of the GCSE reading list?
I think it's probably one of the proudest moments in my career, actually. I think it really hit me when I saw a study guide, one of those GCSE study guides in a bookshop. I didn't even know they'd produced them, but of course, I guess it's on the syllabus, so they would. And I opened the book, and there was a picture of me and a picture of my parents, and then there were reams of stuff about the first South Asian immigrants in Britain, and the Rivers of Blood speech, and the rise of the far right in the 70s, and all that. And I suddenly, it really sort of, it just made me feel quite emotional, actually. And I thought, you know, I always thought we were going to be invisible. I always feared we'd be a footnote in history, and that people would forget that we have, you know, are an indelible part of this country. We have shaped and helped create its history. The wealth of our country helped fuel the Industrial Revolution here. All of these bits of history that we're not taught and are never acknowledged. And I thought, suddenly we matter. You know, there are going to be kids at school that are going to read about this and understand that we are British and we're part of British history. And that's so important and moving for me.
I just want to sort of move you forward a little bit, because after that, you sort of won some awards. You wrote Bargie on the Beach. You did something outstanding. You wrote a play called One of Us, or you co-wrote it with a colleague of yours, and you played all 15 parts. So this is like Kind Hearts and Coronets.
Yeah.
And the Alec Guinness part, but you played all 15 parts. And it was about a West Midlands born Indian girl who runs away from home, from a home. Then you did Bargie on the Beach, another glimpse of South Asian culture. You hosted Sunday East on the BBC. Remind us, what was it like in the early 1980s trying to get work as an Asian woman?
Well, on screen, virtually impossible. But I have to say that I think that's why I ended up doing theatre, really, for my first decade. It was a long time before I got onto television, because in theatre, I was lucky enough to hit the London theatre scene just at a time where there was a real welcoming of diverse voices. And in the theatre, I was being offered roles I would never, ever play on screen, still probably not. A Peruvian millionaire in Serious Money, a deaf mute in a 17th century Essex village girl in Birthright at the Royal Court. I think my first 4 or 5 years were at the Royal Court, doing a whole plethora of parts that had nothing to do with race. So the theatre was where the barriers about casting were being broken down, and it took screen and television decades to catch up with that kind of imagination, actually.
Why do you think that is?
I think because in theatre we all accept that there is a huge leap of imagination the minute you sit down in your seats, and that's always been part of the live theatre experience. And in screen and television, we are hung up, or have been hung up, on whatever people think reality is. So we can't have a black president. That wouldn't be real, they said 25 years ago. That's not reality. It's more real to have an Asian woman playing a victim of domestic violence than a lead cop in this. So this is the part we're going to offer you. But actually, television and screen should not just reflect what we think the status quo is, they should also be aspirational. They should also show us the kind of reality we are working towards. And there's a very interesting study that I wrote, interestingly, which said that way before Obama was elected, there were 3 or 4 major films in which a black president was cast. And at the time, people were going, well, that's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? But then they did some research and directly linked those big blockbusters, and they were all blockbusters, to the changing of people's attitudes and accepting a new kind of reality. And they said, we think the casting of these films actually helped Obama get elected, because suddenly people saw a reality that they thought could be possible. And I think that's what happens a lot in the way we're represented, is that people, their stereotypical view of a community affects the way that they cast something, instead of looking at the exceptions that they should put up there.
But in Britain in particular, when it comes to on-screen talent, we look at the likes of fellow Midlander David Harewood, David Oluwayo, Idris Elba, Archie Punjabi, all examples of people who had to go over to the States to get recognised.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's still true, unfortunately. You know, on a practical level, our industry is just so much smaller and parochial. It's got better because of the different streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon, and suddenly there's a lot more work and a broader palette. But essentially, for example, if you want to get a script onto British television, there is probably only about 6 people that have the power to commission that. That is a tiny, tiny little bubble. In America, well, it's the land of immigrants. They have a completely different view of diverse casting anyway. And the industry is much bigger. It's very sad. There's been a real brain drain. One of the things that makes me really sad, actually, is particularly South Asian female representation. If I think about that, Bargie on the Beach was way ahead of anything that America's done. If I think that Goodness Gracious Me happened here way before anything America's ever done.
Yeah.
America then discovered South Asians and South Asian comedy particularly, and really within 10 years, you've got Mindy Kaling, you've got Lily Singh, you've got a number of South Asian-led comedy pilots and certainly series. And it feels like we started it here, but the Americans took the baton and ran right past us because they were willing to go, we want some new diverse voices and we don't see you in a specific box. So here you are. What stories do you want to tell? That's not happening here.
So I give you a wishing wand. I give you this magic wand, Meera. I hand it over to you. What do you say to the 6 deciding people who make all the decisions? Apart from employ you, of course.
Apart from employ me. Nothing that I think so many of us have been saying for a very long time. It is getting out of the quota system in your head, actually, thinking that there's only room for one Asian show a year, one Asian star, one Asian drama, one Asian comedy, and to take that label right off it and go, what's good? What's good enough? And not to worry about who's not going to watch it, who is going to watch it. The audiences are much smarter than we give them credit for. Audiences will watch what's good, and they don't really care what colour the people are that are in it. They really don't. They just want to watch good stuff.
How much do you feel that the industry in the UK still is systemically, structurally, institutionally racist?
I think, particularly since Black Lives Matter, I think there's been a scramble really to not look racist, or to at least get rid of the lazy. A lot of it is laziness rather than willful racism, I think. A lot of it is ignorance. A lot of it is, well, we would cast, we would have a black sound person or a brown makeup person on this, but we don't know any. It's not an excuse anymore. There are plenty of talented people out there. You have to do a bit of extra work to find them, that's all. So I think in the scramble to not look racist, I think a lot of companies are now, not just in the media, are now really trying to put that right. And it's a shame it took so long, and it took such a worldwide awful event to trigger that. But let's welcome it whenever it happens. And I really hope the sea change is that we can stop talking about it. I would love that. I would love that every interview I do doesn't have to bring up race, because that's certainly not how I live. It's not what I think about when I get up in the morning, nor you, I imagine, nor most people listening, and it shouldn't be.
No, and it doesn't. But I just want to pick up on something you said, if you don't mind, which is that lazy racism, and I think you're right that there is that. It's what people have termed as unconscious.
Yeah.
What have you faced in terms of lazy racism? Is it roles that you haven't got, or things that you're not considered for?
Well, it's really hard to discover, isn't it? Because, you know, the answer you will get from your agent is they've gone in a different direction, which actually could mean a million things. It could genuinely mean you're not right for the part. And that is part of being an actor, of course. Or does it mean we don't think somebody with the brown face should play that part? But how are you ever going to prove that? So it's really hard to pinpoint where that happens. It's much more clearer when I'm trying to get scripts off the ground, because most of the things I've written heavily feature South Asian characters, because that's what I'm interested in. And I feel we have so many untold stories that haven't been told before. Then I do feel the quota system comes in. So many times have I heard we have something similar, which doesn't mean we have something that is exactly the same idea as yours. It just means we have something with brown people in it, and we can't have both things at the same time. That makes me crazy mad.
Yeah. Nikita Dolly says on our chat, love of comedy and music are beyond races, they're universal. And I think you'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Of course. And actually, sort of deep down, we all know that. I think we've just got to have really honest conversations, and I think that's happening. And I think the change really, really will come when the people that hold the purse strings and the power are diverse, when the boardrooms are diverse, when the commissioners are diverse. It's not, people think diversity is a head count, and that you switch on your television and you go, well, there's one and there's one. I mean, they're all over the place. Look, they're even in adverts now, for God's sake. But actually, that's very super.
They really went on one, didn't it?
I know. But that's actually quite super. It's a superficial head count. You know, what has changed the American industry? Having people like Shonda Rhimes, or Ava DuVernay, or Oprah Winfrey, who are black women with, you know, financial power and managerial power, who go, I don't want to go and sit in your office and tell you I want to do this project. I can fund it myself, thank you very much. And I know I've got audiences that will watch it. And actually, when they did it themselves, the broadcasters then went, oh yes, actually, that does work. So now come in with us. But, you know, in a way, you need that autonomy at the beginning to just go, I don't have to go that way anymore, because I'm going to spend 30 years trying to change your mind. So that's what that's why I'm saying when the boardrooms change, when the people who sit in the seats of power, when they're truly diverse in their head and their heart, then we won't have to have these conversations. We won't have to keep explaining ourselves. We'll have the shorthand.
You know, I'm going to be crucified if I don't ask you about Goodness Gracious Me.
Ask away.
It came at a time when we were in the middle of Cool Britannia, and suddenly you hit the screens. I mean, our generation had been used to an 8.5 Hot Mum or you know, Mind Your Language. And then you guys came along. What was it? Were you trying to say, we are confident, we belong here? What were you trying to do?
Well, I think it's a sign of great confidence in any community when you can laugh at yourselves. You know, some of the greatest American comedy writers are Jewish, and they know that. They know what it is like to sit in that space. And I don't think we set off with an agenda, to be honest. I think we all found each other. We knew we wanted to do a sketch show because the Real McCoy, which I was part of as well, which was an all-black sketch show, had just proved that it could be done and done well. But I don't think we ever sat down and went, right, we're going to do comedy that shows white people how damn funny we are. We honestly went, we're going to do the stuff that makes us laugh as British Asians. Because when we sat in a room together, this is the first time I didn't feel lonely. I suddenly found my tribe. I found people I've got absolute cultural shorthand with. That when we talk about characters like the Coopers, your auntie and your uncle who really would rather be English than anything else, or Mrs. I Can Make It at Home. These are all characters that we knew from our own families. And suddenly we went, oh my gosh, well, whatever British Asian comedy is, this must be it, because it's unique. Nobody else has got these references other than us, but we absolutely know what they mean. And probably all the other people like us will know too. Now, the big leap was, would people that weren't British Asian get it? That we didn't know. And frankly, we didn't care, to be fair. And we have this absolute sense of, let's just do what makes us laugh. Nobody knows who the hell we are. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. But I think the authenticity of that voice is what people responded to. It wasn't apologetic. It wasn't PC. It was absolutely who we were at that point in our lives.
And it's become part of the English lexicon. Chuddies, you know. But my favourite skit still remains Going for an English. And your friend Jammies. I thought, can you just say my friend Jammies for me? Because it'll really
my friend Jammies. Well, that was voted the 5th funniest sketch by the British public in a Channel 4 survey, which, you know, to be up there with Monty Python and all the other greats was huge. And there's a big reason that sketch resonated with people, because it's one of those very simple reversal sketches that we did a lot at GGM, but it just took the mirror and went like that. And all those people that have been visiting Indian restaurants and thinking, we don't notice anything, you know, the silent Indians that serve you at your tables or set your bones in the hospitals or serve you in the newspapers, serve your newspapers in the corner shop, or no one ever thought that we had a sense of humour, we had a sense of irony, that we were watching all the time and that we knew what was being said about us.
And how much do you think Goodness Gracious Me has helped break down those barriers that make people realise that we are the same as them?
Oh, I think hugely, actually. I think it really changed the power balance. And because, you know, if you're my generation and growing up watching British comedy, and I watched everything, my dad was a huge comedy fan, but there were certain programmes where you'd suddenly be enjoying it and then some awful, awful racist crap would come out, and it would be like a punch in the stomach, and you go, oh, is that how you see us? Is that who we are? We are the head waggly funny people, and then you've got people blacking up, pretending to be us, saying things that we would never say. That was part of my childhood growing up. Yeah. We were the butt of jokes, always. We were never the ones telling the jokes, and certainly not from our point of view. Goodness Gracious Me gave us back the power of our punchline and gave us the authenticity of our experiences in humour. That was huge. I do remember walking down Wanstead High Street just when the show had gone out, and I was followed by a little bunch of school kids going, kiss my chuddies. And then one of the little white boys turned to his Asian friend and said, bruv, what does chuddies mean? And the little boy's face when he sort of had to explain it, and I thought, wow, that's huge. That's huge. Suddenly, we might even be a bit cool, just for a bit. We might have moved from the invisible people in the corner shop to being cool and funny.
I need to share with you some things that are coming in the chat. Meera says, Jonathan, the name sketch, hit the nail on the head.
Yes. The mispronunciation. Yeah. Again, very simple role reversal sketch.
I went through my career being called Barry Chadwick. Because it didn't compute that Barnie Choudhury could be somebody else. And I think that's why we called our daughter Olivia, so people wouldn't... And I've got to tell you this story because we were at the school gates on her first day, and they said, what's your daughter's name? Olivia. And they said, wow, that's what we called our daughter. I said, strange that, isn't it? it just didn't compute with them that we would integrate so much. And Regina says, a great program which showed the sweetness of both Asian British and non-Asian British is Mrs. Sidhu Investigates. Are you planning to do that?
Thank you for that. I hope, yes. I think there's going to be a second radio series, and and I think they're trying to develop it for television. Let's see. Well, that could take a long time.
Who do I have to sleep with to make that happen for you?
Oh, darling, it's a very short list. 6 people, just 6.
Right, I'll do that. I'll suffer for the Asian communities. So, look, so I've got to ask you this question. I want you to imagine that I am Carolina Hearn, the late Carolina Hearn.
Loved her.
When I ask you this question, which is, what first attracted you to the devilishly handsome and talented Sanjeev Bhaskar?
He would love that. Oh my God, that's so embarrassing. I don't know what to say.
Well, I hear that
knows?
it was on a long flight to Australia that you both fell in love. Is that true?
It kind of was, yeah. But, as he will say, when you've got 24 hours in the air and a lot of vodka, what else is going to happen? Free vodka at that. Yes, just one of those happy, wonderful things, really, to start off as friends. I mean, we were friends for many, many years. So I would thoroughly recommend friendship as a basis for marriage. It's the best way. And to have someone that makes you laugh continually.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that because presumably people have, because you're both such fantastic talents in terms of comedic moments, is it one punchline after another?
When we're in the mood, I mean, other than that, it's grumpiness and who's taking out the recycling and, whatever you get in any domestic setup. Yeah. I think the great advantage and this is probably why a lot of actors do end up together, actually, it's such a weird profession. And it's full of insecurity. And it's so great to have somebody that really understands the weirdness of it. So that, I think, has been a huge balm for both of us. And of course, just being able to chat over ideas and we both write separately, but it's fantastic to have a sounding board as well. And someone that sort of gets the world that you're in, for sure.
I'll come on to the questions from the audience in a second, but I've got a couple more before I sort of hand over. One of them being that the Kumars at number 42 was an international award-winning series.
Yeah.
BAFTA are trying desperately hard to push for more diversity. How do the Emmys, how do the BAFTAs of this world help you in what they do, and should they be doing more?
Well, I think BAFTA's really, really stepped up in the last year. And of course, the head of BAFTA is now a South Asian called Krish Majumdar, who's a fantastic sort of advocate, quite rightly, for diversity. So I think that's real.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. I claim that.
But Krish has implemented quite a few changes, changing to the membership, changing to voting procedures. Lots of things have gone through over the last year, again in the wake of Black Lives Matter, but also the BAFTA So White rows that were going on. I'll give you an example of how it used to be. The Kumars never won a BAFTA. It won pretty much every other award. And we were put into the light entertainment category. So in the year that we got a BAFTA nomination, we were up against Have I Got News for You? Sanjeev and I were both nominated for Best Performance, but not as actors, against hosts. So I was up against Paul, I've forgotten his name, he's really famous.
Paul Merson.
Yes, who won it that year. And it was just that sort of lack of care of, firstly, this isn't, the Kumars was never on the same level as Have I Got News for You? It's just, it's an acting job. It happens to be a chat show, but why is it not in the sitcom category? Why have you put us up against a host? I know. And there's still a sadness about that, actually, for both of us, because we thought that was probably, our one opportunity, and we would have been the first South Asians to get a BAFTA. Well, and they just put us in. Again, it was a lack of care for what we were doing, I think. Those kind of things disappoint you looking back, yeah.
Well, we at Eastern Eye, an AGM, have the actors, as you know, and you're a fierce, proud advocate of the actors. So I want to thank you very much indeed for being one of those people who actually embrace your ethnic background. Jatinder Verma, as you know, said that artists like yourselves are the surgeons of the heart and soul, and that's referring to the actors' eagerness to push young Asians to become doctors and whatever, but also to become actors. What would you tell your 16-year-old self having a conversation with Meera Syal growing up? What would you say to her now that you know at this moment?
I would say start using the moustache cream now, because it's going to get worse. I would definitely say that. I would want to reassure myself that it will get better. That right now it feels lonely, and right now it feels like you're mad because you're the only one. You don't see anybody around you that wants to do what you do or has the same sense of humour as you do. And it will be really easy to give up and think, because I don't see anybody else like me doing it, it's not for me. Someone has to start the ball rolling, and you will find your tribe. And things are so much easier when you do things together, when you have solidarity as a community. It's just so much better, so much easier.
We've held you up as a pioneer, and you are. How important is it that we do this project?
This is why I said yes. I think, as I talked before about and the success of Anita and why it meant so much to me, our history, we're making history as we go along. And it's not written down. We have not been written into so much of British history. We're just finding that out now. I'm writing a historical drama with Tanika Gupta, and one of the characters in it is an ayah. And trying to find historical records of the ayahs, and indeed of of Asian lives, you know, we've been in this country for hundreds of years, but actually trying to find the records and trying to find particularly the personal stories, the narratives of those people. It's so sad when there's nothing there other than a statistic saying Aya arrived on dock, died, blah blah blah, and there's a copy of their passport and nothing else, nothing of who that Aya was, her dreams, her hopes, her fears, what happened to her. So a lot of our history has not been recorded. If you're not recorded, you're forgotten. So this is really important.
You know, it struck me as you were talking about Ayers. There's this famous anecdote, isn't there, that Merle Oberon, who starred opposite Laurence Olivier in Cliff, in Wuthering Heights, her mother was her ayah that she actually came across. So you know there are stories out there, and I think that's what we're trying to get, which are the real human interest stories that sort of say it. Meera, you're a polymath. You do everything. There's nothing beyond your talent. I mean, I sometimes pinch myself that you know I've managed to do what I've done in my career. Have you ever felt an imposter syndrome, or is it just me who feels like that?
All the time. Well, that's the awful insecurity about what we do. I mean, you can go through a bad patch where you just don't get any of the jobs you're up for and all of your scripts have been turned down. Yeah, for sure. There are times where it's been so hard, I have wanted to give up. You just think, I'm banging my head against a brick wall. And that is the time where you need the rest of your community. You know, that my fellow creatives are the only ones that understand this pain and frustration. And we have to keep each other going. It just seems that we're going 2 steps forward and 1 back sometimes. And then you breathe and you look at Himesh Patel and Archie Punjabi and you go, well, okay, even if you know, it didn't quite work for my generation, I see that it is working for the next one. There is that old saying that you plant an acorn and you expect that your grandchildren will sit in the shade of the tree. And in a way, that's what you do. It might not be, you might not see all the fruits of your labours in your generation, but you hope that your children and your grandchildren are going to have a much easier time.
I'm going to stop there, but I'm going to ask a couple of questions, if I may, from the audience who are listening in. And I want to thank you personally for being an exceptional role model. I first saw you in Kinsley. With Lee Lawson.
Yes.
I watched Lee Lawson because my foster dad acted with him.
Oh wow! Okay.
When they were in Coventry, and I only watched it because of Lee Lawson, and then you came on. I'm not saying this to butter you up, but I just stood up and clapped. I just stood up and clapped, and you know the character Val. I think you're playing Val. Is that right?
Yeah, but good memory. Yeah, Val.
You know, who kept him in order. This guy who was a maverick. I just thought you acted him off the screen. And for anybody who doesn't know, Lee Lawson is Mr. Twiggy. He's married to Twiggy. So you have really sort of, you know, it's been an honour to talk to you. I just have a couple of questions from the audience. This is from Bhavna Sharma. Like you mentioned, how Disney is coming up with spin. Huge congratulations on that. Increasingly, we find a lot of movie premises telling stories rather than exploring themes originating from the Indian context. This is, of course, excluding Bollywood. Would you say that these Indian characters' plots are something used as an exotic element rather than being depicted in their entirety?
Well, I would say probably not in the case of Spin, because I think they were at pains to depict them as an American family with lots of American concerns, and the difference being that in the music that the young girl makes has a lot of Indian influences, because her mother came from India and was a wonderful musician, and so she creates a whole new sound using both her heritage and hip hop and the other influences she's picked up. So I think in that case it was a rather beautiful synthesis of how having more than one culture can actually enhance your creative life. I know what you mean. There is a danger of always going down the exotic route, but I think Spin doesn't do that in this case.
Great. Nikita writes, did your race play a big part in the roles you're offered in the theatre, where barriers were being broken down?
Did it play a big part?
In the roles that you were offered? I mean, you said earlier that the theatre was the leveller.
Yes.
It was a place, but how, I mean, you were in Bombay Dreams, you were in Annie, so the theatre is almost colourblind, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say quite the opposite. I think that my race has mattered the least in theatre. I've chosen to do Indian parts in the theatre because they've been fantastic parts, and like in Behind the Beautiful Forevers at the National was a fantastic play. But gosh, I mean, yes, I played Miss Hannigan in Annie. I played Shirley in Shirley Valentine, in which there was absolutely no reference to my race ever.
And your Liverpudlian accent was pretty good as well.
Oh, well, thanks very much. So Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing. I just played one of the main roles in Noises Off, which I've forgotten what her name was. My God, Dottie in Noises Off. Again, absolutely no mention of race. So I would say yes, that in the opposite, it matters. It's always mattered less in theatre, and that's in fact why I have done so much more theatre than television.
Well, I've got to stop now, but I want to read a final comment to you from Vicky Hosegood. Lovely to hear you, Meera. I also grew up in Birmingham in the 1970s and 80s. You said heavy times for families from diaspora communities. It feels so important as older people to listen and share diverse accounts of Midlanders who grew up alongside each other, but whose lives were so poorly represented to others at the time. I also want to thank you, Meera, for your Goodness Gracious Me radio. The power of, I'm not going to say this word, but the power of being able to puncture pomposity and poke people's self-absorption. And Vicky says, student gap year gushing always makes me think of your wonderful Indian students visiting Britain sketch. It's this ability, and also this is from Humin Wang. Dear Meera, I enjoy your talk and voice so much. May I know how you balance your own emotions and characters' emotions in the performances that you do?
Well, yours are using your own emotions, obviously. You sort of dig into them for the roles you do, but I've always been very good at leaving them at the door. I've been a mum for 28 years, so I was a mum way before.
Enough.
I certainly am. And I had a child before really I had success anywhere, so I've always been a working mum, and I think that's quite a great leveller, that you can't really be bringing your angst home when you've got someone to take to the toilet as soon as you get in. You just have to, now I'm right, that was a job and I'm doing this job.
They're great levelers, aren't they?
Great leveller. Oh, I should mention, because we did touch on the Kumars, I do actually have a new radio show out on Radio 4 in which I'm reviving Granny Kumar.
Oh, brilliant. When is that?
It's out on February the 10th. It's called Gossip and Goddesses with Granny Kumar. And it's Granny hosting her own chat show with all her old Indian auntie friends, and all of our guests are women of colour.
Oh, look, I can't wait. Look, it'll be on BBC Sound, so it'll never go away.
And Radio 4. Yeah.
You can download it as well. So, you know, so it's that. Look, I could talk and talk and talk and talk to you. You know, as I say, I'm a huge fan, and I am not worthy, so I bow down to you. Can I hand over, please? Can I ask Sabu? Sabu, would you mind unmuting everybody so that they can give Meera a round of applause that she's so
sure, absolutely. I think we could definitely do that. At least our panel we could do definitely.
Thank you so much indeed. Can I hand over?
That was lovely.
Can I hand over back to Jane to close proceedings?
Absolutely, thank you, Barney. Well, I've just been sitting here absolutely rapt for the last hour. It's been absolutely fantastic. I haven't moved from my chair. I just, before I go into a formal vote of thanks, I want to give Rebecca Fairbairn from UKRI India the floor. She's actually joining us from Delhi, and the night is wearing on there. And just want to let Rebecca say a few words about the work that the High Commission is doing on the Living Bridge.
Thank you very much, Jane. To be honest, I don't really know how to follow that. I think everything that I had planned to say feels quite meaningless after hearing such a fantastic conversation. What a lovely way to spend an evening. What I was going to say was that the UK and India, as all of you know, have a unique relationship. We have shared ambitions for the future, secure, sustainable world, healthy and prosperous populations, and with research and innovation at the heart of all of that. But really, what we benefit from is a unique living bridge of people, their ideas, institutions, arts and culture that we've heard so much about today. And this is what we call the living bridge in the British High Commission here. And it's that joins our countries together. I think that's really the foundation upon which the rest of our partnership is built. I'm going to give a little advert now for UK Research and Innovation. We are the UK's major public funder of research and innovation. And I think many of you know that we are based in Swindon in the UK. Most people don't realise that we also have 4 international offices. One of these is UKRI India, which Jane has mentioned is where I'm speaking from now, based in New Delhi. And we work to build partnerships, or as I like to think of it, new living bridges between our countries. I'm really proud to say that education, research and innovation partnership hold a vital position in our current and future relationship. And when we talk about research and innovation, we absolutely include the arts, drama, language, history. We aren't just talking about the STEM subjects that I think people get carried away with, important as they are. In India, education is the UK's most admired strength, and I think that's a really exciting foundation to build on. Our UK-India Research and Innovation Partnership has grown absolutely exponentially since we set up our office here, from less than £1 million back in 2008 to a predicted 400 million this year. So you can really see the growth in the partnership in research and that breadth in research and innovation that's covered. We in UKRI India are absolutely committed to continuing to build our partnership, and it's initiatives like this, the Southampton India Centre, living bridges like yourself, Meera, Professor Choudhury, Sabu, Kalpesh and Shailesh Solanki, Amarjit Singh and all the work you've done to make this happen, Lord Patel and your ideas that really bring this living bridge to life. So my last point to make is that today's chat has been absolutely illuminating, and I can't wait to join future events so that we can more deeply understand the connections that we have and that genuine living bridge. I'm really, really pleased to be supporting this Pioneers project. And as you've said, Meera, preventing invisibility, the systematic capture of South Asian diaspora in the UK is so important. And if we don't capture it and treasure it, then it will be lost. And that means that we can't properly understand what it is to be Briton or British. And thank you very much for the time you've you've given us today and the insight that you've provided. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. That was really summed up all of our feelings, I think. It just remains for me to thank Meera and Barney from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you,
really
Barney.
given us a flying start. I want to give a quick advert for the next Fireside Chat, where we have Dr. Chand Nagpur, who is the chair of the British Medical Council, on Friday, the 22nd of February. So we go, unfortunately, to the doctors. From the arts, well, not unfortunately,
we need them,
fortunately. And I just also I've just had some news drop into my email inbox, which I'm going to use to embarrass our Professor Padmadas. I just want to say that he has just been part of a £2 million research grant, which has just been awarded by the UKRI Agile Response to COVID-19 Fund. And this is a consortium on practices on wellbeing and resilience for BAME families and communities. So Sabu, go for it. And we look forward to that research because we really, really need it right now. So we're proud of you. And
thank you.
We're proud of everything. But thank you, Meera. You've given us a huge launch. Thank you to Barney, thank you to the Solanki brothers, to Asian Media Group, to Amajit and India Business Group, and to Lord Patel for the initial vision. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.